1962, a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital heard voices and teacups clinking from a locked room no one had entered in decades. Over the years, patients vanished, each time leaving behind a single warm cup of tea. The door was sealed, bricked over, but the voices never stopped. And sometimes the table is still set for the next guest.
February 14th, 1962. St. Mary's Hospital, Boston. 3:18 a.m. Night nurse Helen Doyle was making her rounds on the third floor when she noticed something strange. At the far end of the east wing, past the maternity ward and the old storage closets, a single door stood in the dark. Room 3E17. She had worked at St. Mary's for 7 years and never once seen it open. She assumed it was a closet or a maintenance space. But that night, a faint light was leaking from under the door. Helen stopped, listened. Faint, soft. The clink of porcelain, the faint hiss of steam, like someone pouring tea. At 3:19 a.m., she stepped closer. The light inside flickered, not electric, but warm, amber, like from a lamp. She placed her hand on the doorknob. Cold, too cold, Helen. Knocked, no answer. She turned the knob, locked. The sound inside stopped. Total silence. When she came back later with the night supervisor, the light was gone. The door looked different, like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust lined the frame. The brass knob was dull. The supervisor told her it was a maintenance storage room and to leave it be. But Helen swore she'd heard tea being poured. The next morning she asked around. No one admitted knowing anything about the room. Some nurses claimed it had been sealed years earlier. Others said it wasn't even on the current floor plan. Helen let it go. For a while. 2 weeks later, an orderly named Frank Kelly disappeared. He was last seen wheeling a laundry cart toward the east wing. Security searched the whole floor. They found the cart, empty, parked neatly against the wall, right next to room 3E17. For the next few months, the door stayed dark. No sounds, no light. Staff avoided that end of the hall. Even patients whispered about it. They called it the locked room. Some said it was a quarantine ward from the war years. Others swore it was part of the psych unit that closed in the 50s. The rumors didn't matter. The room stayed locked until April 7th, 1962. At 11:43 p.m., the light came back. This time, Helen didn't go alone. She brought 2 nurses from the night shift. They stood in the hall, staring at the golden light bleeding from beneath the door. And then, voices. 2 of them. Low, conversational. A man and a woman. Calm, measured. No one on staff was scheduled to be there. No keys had been signed out. One of the nurses bent down to look through the keyhole. She gasped, backed away, refused to say what she saw. When security arrived, the light was gone again. The door was locked. And the key, according to the hospital log, had not been touched in 18 years. Word spread quietly. Older staff muttered about 3E17 under their breath. One janitor claimed that back in 1948, the room was used for end-of-life palliative experiments, whatever that meant. Another swore it used to be a doctor's office, but the doctor vanished in '49. No records existed. The hospital's own maps didn't list the room anymore. By summer, even visitors knew to stay away from that end of the hall. And then came August 3rd. The cleaners were doing their early morning rounds when they found something odd. A tea set, 2 cups, 2 saucers, 2 plates, all perfectly clean, sitting on a silver tray, placed neatly in the middle of the hallway outside 3E17. Still warm, no fingerprints, no sign of food, no explanation. 3 days later, another disappearance. This time, A patient, 84-year-old Margaret Connors, last seen by her roommate just before lights out. The next morning, bed empty, floor removed, gown folded neatly on the chair. Security combed every floor. They found nothing, except one thing: her slippers, placed side by side outside room 3E17. The hospital quietly moved patients off the east wing. The third floor's far corridor was left dim and unused. Officially, it was under maintenance. In reality, staff didn't want to be near it. But the room stayed locked. Always locked. In October 1962, Helen transferred to a different hospital. She never spoke about St. Mary's again. But the story didn't end, because in 1969, a maintenance team was sent to repair a leaking pipe in the East Wing. They brought a work order and a master key. When they reached the far corridor, they stopped at the locked room. One of the men joked, "Should we finally see what's in here?" He turned the key. The lock clicked. The door opened 3 inches before jamming, like something was blocking it from the inside. The men pushed harder. The door gave way, and the smell hit them. Not rot, not mold. Tea. Freshly brewed tea. Asterisk, asterisk. 10 years had passed since Helen Doyle last walked past room 3E17. Most of the old staff were gone. The hospital had a new administrator, new funding, and a renovation plan to modernize the East Wing. The third floor was on the list. By September, a contractor named Jim Fraser was assigned to inspect the sealed section. He had no knowledge of the stories. To him, it was just a dusty old corridor. The first day, he brought 2 laborers and a cart of tools. They cleared broken gurneys, old filing cabinets, and stacks of rusted bed frames. When they reached this end of the hall, they found it. A single closed door, frame intact, paint cracked, brass knob tarnished, that it wasn't even marked as 3E17 anymore. Just a blank plaque. Jim made a note: replace door, repaint frame. When he went to turn the knob, locked. He asked the site supervisor for a key. The man's face changed. "We don't open that one." Jim laughed. "What, asbestos?" "Something like that," the man muttered, and walked away. 2 days later, Jim came back alone in the early morning before the hospital workers arrived. He'd found a master key in the maintenance office. He slotted it into the lock. Click, the door eased. Opened half an inch and stopped like before. This time, Jim pushed. It opened 6 inches, enough for his flashlight beam to catch something inside. A table, small, wooden, set for 2. China plates, silver utensils, cups, steam rising from both cups. Jim froze. It was impossible. The room had been sealed for decades. Then, a shadow crossed the beam. A man's silhouette, still, facing Jim. The shape of a head tilting slightly. Like in curiosity, Jim stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. When it rolled forward and lit the doorway again, the silhouette was gone. The steam was gone. The cups were empty. Jim shut the door. He left the site and didn't return. The renovation continued without him. Workers painted the hall, replaced lighting, even stripped the wallpaper. But the locked door stayed. No one asked. No one wanted to. In 1974, a nursing student named Patricia Lane was on the late shift, helping transfer patients to the new surgical wing. She took a wrong turn and ended up in the Far East corridor. She'd heard the stories, but she didn't believe them. Until she passed the locked door. Someone was singing inside. Low, melodic, a man's voice. She froze, listening. The song was old, something she'd heard her grandfather hum. Then another voice joined in. A woman. 2 voices. Perfectly in tune. Patricia knocked softly. The singing stopped. The doorknob turned from the inside. She ran. The next morning, she told her supervisor. The supervisor told her it was probably a radio left on by the cleaners. But the cleaners hadn't been in that corridor for months. That by 1976, the disappearances began again. A night porter named Alvin Ross vanished during his 2 a.m. trash collection. Security cameras caught him in the West Wing elevator, and then nothing. The next day, his cart was found outside 3 times 10 to the 17. A single teacup sat on top that winter. A psychiatric patient managed to slip away from the orderly escorting him to radiology. He was found 2 weeks later, dead in an abandoned boiler room in the hospital basement. On the floor beside him, a folded napkin embroidered with the initials C.R. No one on staff had those initials. No patient had those initials. The laundry logs showed no record of such linens. In 1978, the hospital hired a private security consultant named Peter Sloan. His job was to investigate missing items, staff theft, and patient complaints. When 3 nurses quit in 1 week, citing East Wing disturbances, Sloan decided to check it out himself. At 3:12 a.m. on March 4th, he walked the East Wing with a Polaroid camera. He took photos of every door, every corner. When he reached the locked door, he paused. Light. A golden glow spilling out from the thin gap beneath. Steam curling into the hall. The smell of fresh tea. He took a picture. The flash lit the corridor, and in that instant, the door rattled violently from the inside. Sloan bolted. The photo developed as he ran. When he looked at it later, his hands shook. Through the narrow gap under the door. 2 black shoes, shiny, facing the camera. That summer, Sloan quit. He refused to explain why. The photo vanished from the security office files. By 1980, the locked room was officially bricked over during another renovation. The new corridor ended with a smooth white wall. The hospital claimed the structural risk was too high to keep the doorway. But staff who worked there said something else. They said the wall was warm. And sometimes, when the hall was empty, you could smell tea. The East Wing's 3rd floor now ended in a clean, white plaster wall where 3E17 used to be. Officially, the doorway was removed to improve patient safety. Unofficially, people still avoided walking past it. Not because of what they saw, but because of what they smelled. Even with no opening, no vents, no access, a faint aroma of tea drifted from that wall late at night. Warm, fresh, impossible. Young intern named Daniel Reese heard the stories on his first week. He laughed them off. Old nurses warning the rookie. But on March 19th, during an overnight shift, Daniel stayed behind to finish paperwork in the East Wing nurses' station. At 3:21 a.m., he heard it, the faint clink of porcelain. From behind the wall, he walked closer. Steam, condensing on the cool plaster, like someone had just opened a kettle inside. Then, a voice, male, whispering, "She's here again." Daniel spun around. The hall was empty. 2 nights later, he came back with a stethoscope. He pressed it to the wall at 3 a.m. Voices, 2 of them, muffled, calm, as if discussing something important. Then silence, followed by 3 slow knocks. From the other side, Daniel ran. By 1983, the hospital hired a paranormal research group quietly, under the guise of environmental noise testing. The team brought EMF meters, tape recorders, and thermal cameras. They set up overnight in the East Wing. At 2:57 a.m., one of the recorders captured a short burst of conversation. "Man, you came back. Woman, of course." Followed by the sound of a teacup being set down. The thermal camera pointed at the wall showed 2 warm spots about the height of human heads, side by side. No heat source inside the wall. During the review, one investigator noticed something else. On one of the long exposure photographs, faintly visible against the wall, was a darker outline, the shape of a door, and within it, the faint figure of a man standing perfectly still, facing the camera. In 1985, Daniel, now a resident doctor, decided to take a bigger risk. He found old blueprints of St. Mary's. On a coffee-stained page from 1934, there it was, room 3E17. Dimensions, 14 feet by 10 feet. Connected directly to nothing. No hall, no exit. Just a box in the floor plan. Daniel realized something else. The room had a second door, on the opposite wall, leading into an old storage room in the adjacent wing. That storage room was still accessible, but never used. On June 14, 1985, Daniel went in after hours. The storage room smelled of mildew and dust, stacks of rusted wheelchairs, broken 4 stands. In the far corner, a section of wall where the plaster didn't match. He tapped it. Hollow. He took a crowbar and began prying. Plaster cracked. Dust filled the air. And behind it, wood, an old, heavy door. The knob turned easily. Daniel pulled. It opened and stepped inside. It wasn't a normal room. The air was warm, still, smelling strongly of fresh tea and something floral. Lilacs, maybe. In the center, a round wooden table, 2 chairs, a porcelain tea set, both cups full. Steam, curling into the dim light. No people, no footprints. The far wall was the one bricked over in the east wing. But here, it was perfectly normal, with the old 3E17 door intact from the inside. Daniel walked to the table. The tea was hot, real. He touched a spoon. Still warm. Then he noticed something else. The chairs weren't quite empty. On the seat of one, a folded linen napkin embroidered with the initials, CR. On the other, a woman's leather glove. Daniel heard something behind him. Footsteps, soft, measured. He turned. A man was standing in the doorway he had just come through. Tall, thin, wearing a dark suit neatly pressed. His face was pale, expressionless. He said nothing. Daniel's heart pounded. He stepped back toward the table. The man didn't move, didn't blink. Then, from the far side of the room, a woman's voice. Daniel. It was right next to his ear. He spun. No one. But when he looked back at the doorway, it was empty. The man was gone. The tea was cold. ***, June 18th, 1985. 4 days had passed since Daniel Reese stepped inside room 3E17. He hadn't told anyone. Not because he didn't want to, but because every time he tried to explain, the words felt wrong. Like he'd imagined it. Like it hadn't really happened, but the glove was real. He kept it in a desk drawer, wrapped in tissue. And the napkin, with the initial CR, that was real too. He'd tried to trace those initials through hospital archives. No staff, no patients, no visitors in the last 30 years matched. The problem was, the room wasn't always there. When Daniel went, back 3 nights later with a Polaroid camera, the storage room wall was solid again. No hidden door. No hollow sound. Nothing. He knocked. It sounded like any other wall. July 1st, 1985. Daniel got a call at home from an unknown number. When he picked up, there was no hello. Just a man's voice. Calm. Even. You shouldn't have gone in. The line went dead. Over the next week, Daniel started noticing changes. Faint tea smell in the elevator. Random clinks of porcelain during night shifts. And twice, in the reflection of darkened windows, a tall man in a dark suit standing behind him. When he turned, the hall was empty. On July 11th, An elderly patient named Howard Greaves disappeared from his bed during visiting hours. Security found his slippers placed neatly against the bricked-up east wing wall. Next to them, a cup of tea, still warm. Daniel couldn't ignore it anymore. He decided to bring proof to someone who might believe him. That night, he took a fellow resident, Karen Liu, to the storage room. "This is crazy," she said, stepping over old boxes. Daniel tapped the far wall. Hollow, he pried with a crowbar. The plaster cracked away. The door was there again. Exactly as before, Karen stared. "This isn't possible," she whispered. Daniel turned the knob. The door swung inward. Warm air hit their faces, and there it was. The tea table. 2 chairs. Steam rising from both cups. Karen stepped inside first. She walked slowly around the table. "This is perfect." It's like she froze. Daniel followed her gaze. On the far side of the room, against the wall, stood a tall man in a dark suit. Expressionless, motionless. Before Daniel could speak, a woman's voice drifted from behind the man. Low, gentle. "You're early." Karen gripped Daniel's arm. "Daniel, she's looking at us?" The man stepped aside. And for the first time, Daniel saw her. Late 30s. Dark hair pinned neatly under a nurse's cap. Green eyes. She smiled, not warmly, but like someone recognizing an old friend. Daniel's throat went dry. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. She picked up one of the cups and took a slow sip. Then she placed it back on the saucer without breaking. Eye contact. The tall man moved to stand behind her. His hand rested on her shoulder. Neither blinked. Karen whispered, "We should go." Daniel nodded. They stepped back toward the door. As they did, the woman spoke, still calm, still smiling. "Don't let it close." They stumbled into the storage room. Daniel reached for the crowbar, but the door was already swinging. Shut. By the time they slammed it, they were staring at solid plaster. No seam. No frame. 2 days later, Karen resigned from the residency program. She never told Daniel why. She never returned to St. Mary's. August 1985. The disappearances accelerated. 2 nurses, 1 orderly, 1 patient. All last seen near the East Wing. Each time, something small was left behind. A folded napkin, a glove, a teacup. Security. Installed new cameras in the East Corridor. On August 17th, at 3:18 a.m., the feed from camera 7 showed a smooth white wall. And then, frame by frame, a door slowly forming in the plaster, not swinging open, appearing. The feed cut out at 3:19. When it resumed, the wall was blank again. September 3rd, 1985. Daniel Reese hadn't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The tall man, the woman in the nurse's cap, the teacups, and the door, peering in places he shouldn't. Once in, a hallway reflection. Once in the polished chrome of an elevator panel. Once in the black of his own bedroom window. Always there, always waiting. That night, he decided he would go back. Alone. At 2:47 a.m., Daniel unlocked the storage room. The air felt heavier, warmer. The mildew smell was gone, replaced by lilacs and tea. He walked to the far wall. It wasn't plaster anymore. The old wooden door stood in, plain sight, unhidden. He turned the knob. The hinges groaned softly. Light spilled into the storage room, golden, steady. Inside, the tea table, steam rising from both cups. 2 chairs, empty. Daniel stepped in. The door shut softly. Behind him, no click, no lock, just shut. He picked up a cup, hot, real. The tea inside rippled slightly, as if someone had just set it down. Then a voice. Right beside him, You made it. He turned. The woman was there, closer than ever. Her eyes seemed brighter, almost glowing. In the low light, she gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please," she said. Daniel hesitated. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who's been waiting a long time." The tall man entered silently from the far side. He took the other chair, poured tea into his cup with slow precision. Daniel's chest tightened. "Why me?" The woman tilted her head. "It isn't you." She sipped her tea. "It's everyone." The man's voice was deep, even. "Do you know why this hospital can't let us go?" Daniel shook his head. "Because we never left." The air in the room grew warmer. The walls seemed closer. Daniel realized there were no seams, no windows. Just smooth, endless surfaces. The far door, the one to the east wing, was gone. The woman leaned forward. "You've brought things in here, Daniel. You've taken things out. That's not allowed." Daniel stepped back. "What happens if I leave now?" The man's expression didn't change. "You won't." The teacups rattled. The table shuddered. A deep vibration filled the air, like a train passing far underground. Daniel reached for the door he came through. It wasn't there. Just wall. The woman stood slowly. "Sit, Daniel." He shook his head. The vibration grew louder. His vision blurred. The next part he couldn't remember clearly. Only fragments. Hands on his shoulders, pressing him into the chair. The woman's face close to his. Her whisper, "You'll be here when the next one comes." Morning staff found the storage room empty. No sign of forced entry. No Daniel. On the desk in the residence lounge, his keys and ID sat neatly stacked. Next to them, a porcelain cup. Still warm. The disappearances stopped after that. No more teacups. No more slippers. The wall in the east wing stayed blank. But sometimes, late at night, staff swore they heard faint conversation drifting through. The plaster. 2 voices. A man, a woman, and sometimes a third. In 1991, during a minor remodel, workers opened the storage room wall again. They found a door, and behind it, a small wooden table. 3 chairs. 1 cup still half full. No one in St. Mary's talks about it now. Officially, room 3E17 never existed. Unofficially, they say the table's always set for whoever comes next.